is an overview of the Cwicly Filter Block. In this video, we will be focusing on the filter block and how it works in tandem with the query block. Before building a filter block, it is important we understand what it is, what it isn't, and what its mechanics are. For these reasons, we won't be building a filter block in this video. We will go into more detail about building a filter block for both a product and post query in future videos. While most people use a filter for sorting through products, it is important to remember that the Cwicly Filter Block is extremely versatile and can be used to filter just about anything, such as posts, users, terms, and any post type you create, films, books, articles. Instead of restricting you to a preset template format where elements are forced to be in the same place, with Cwicly, every filtering element is independent and can be placed wherever you want on your design. Filtering is an essential way to navigate a website's content or products faster and more efficiently by allowing the user to select exactly what they're looking for, whether it be color, music genre, size, or brand. We've all been there. Maybe you're on a clothing website and you're looking for a last-minute t-shirt for your friend's birthday that respects a €30 budget limit. Or maybe it's a Friday night and you find yourself on a film recommendation website and are in the mood for an action movie exclusively starring Nicolas Cage. Whatever it may be, these specific requirements need a powerful filtering system to allow the user to find exactly what they're looking for. In Cwicly, you can achieve this thanks to the filter block in association with the query block. We have consciously kept the filter block as an independent block to allow absolute design freedom. This flexibility also implies that you can filter any type of element: posts, terms, users, and products. The way it works in Cwicly is, you have the filter block and the query block, which contains all the posts, products, whatever element you want to filter, both present on the same page. Once you have defined the type of filter you are targeting from the query editor and have set the specifics in the filter block, all there is left to do is to hook them up. The filter helps you refine your searches by working with the query editor. The filter is there to assist the query by providing the sorting data or characteristics that the user requests, like size, color, and height. It is important to note that the filter block isn't a block that contains all of the filters for your page's query block, which would be limiting and against what we believe in as far as design liberty is concerned. Instead, the filter block simply provides the data for a specific query parameter. That's it. So, if you want to query more than one parameter, you will need more than one filter. The filter block adds or removes a parameter in the URL that the query block uses to modify what it displays. This means that you have an even greater flexibility when it comes to design and placement of filters, since you can create specific styles for specific filters wherever you like on the page. For example, a color filter naturally won't have the same look as a size filter. On top of this, the filter block doesn't limit you in the blocks that can be added. Design with only the blocks you want and need. For ease of use, the filter block, like the repeater block, repeats your layout for every displayed item, making your workflow more efficient. Before delving into the filter block and its mysteries, let's first see it in action, which is the most interesting part. Here we are on our makeshift shops page, La Boutique, with all its trendy clothing. We can observe its diversity in clothing by skimming through its products thanks to the pagination navigation. However, looking through 40 products to find what we want isn't ideal. This is where filtering comes into play. There are several ways you can filter these items. For example, let's say I'm only interested in viewing red tops. First, I can select the top category and then select the red color in the color filter section. And as by magic, my desired product appears. We could also achieve this by using the search bar. So if I clear my search by selecting the clear button, which by the way is in a filter type, and I type in hoodie, which is the product that came up with those specific parameters, the same product will appear. Of course, we also have the possibility of selecting multiple filters at the same time. So if I choose a pleather material, set an M size, and bring my pricing range down to $18, a product meeting all those requirements appears. While we were performing those filters, we can also observe that some brands, colors, and categories get unselectable with the opacity styling, since there are no products left that meet those requirements. But what if we wanted to remove a few of these filters, since what came up doesn't fit what we're looking for? We can simply select any of the added parameters placed near the clear button, and voila, the filter gets removed. Talking about adding, removing items, we can observe that our URL parameters updates whenever a filter is selected or removed. It is essential to also note and appreciate this block's flexibility, not only in placement, but also in appearance. With just the same block, you can achieve completely different looking filters, which fits the specificity of what that filter has to achieve. Whether it be an image or color, the filter block shapeshifts accordingly. Now that we have played around with these filters, let's get more specific. In Cwicly, you get to have various filter types: search, select, multiple single buttons, checkbox input, radio input, image and color filtering, and range slider. Of course, all these filter types are present on this page. Our search bar, size and type filters use the custom filter type. Our category and color filters use the button single filter type. The material filter uses the select filter type. The price filter uses the range selection filter type. The brands filter uses the multiple button filter type. The user selection filter, which shows when a user has a filter parameter on, uses the user selection filter type. And lastly, the clear button uses the clear selection filter type. All these different filter types have specific ways of retrieving data. Don't worry, we will be going over these filters in more detail later on in this video. The last observation we can make before heading to the editor is the gray placeholders for the elements in the query block that appear after loading the page, selecting a filter, or even using the pagination navigation. This effect is produced thanks to the Frontend rendering property. Let's now head to the Gutenberg Editor. As you can see, it looks identical to the front end. Since the filter block isn't a standalone block and works with the query block, it's better we first take a quick look at how the query block is set up in our case. Let's select the query block. Before we open the query editor, in the Primary tab, in the Settings tab, we can observe that the front-end rendering is enabled. This is what we had observed earlier, with the gray placeholders for the elements in the query block. This property must be enabled for the filter block to work. But what is it? Basically, this property allows your query's elements to be loaded and processed on the front end instead of on the server. On top of this, to avoid content layout shift or CLS, the query's elements take on visual placeholders while the page is loading, to allow a visual loading of the elements on the page. This is an essential property to have toggled on for filtering, so that every time the query is filtered, the filtered elements can be loaded without compromising the page's load time and layout shift. In web jargon, this placeholder effect is called a skeleton screen, since it carries the idea that the element skeletons are being shown and then their flesh appears. Camille Saint-Saëns would have probably liked this. In Cwicly, by default, the skeleton will be applied to every element when they are in a column flex direction. However, it is always better to go in and tweak the element skeleton manually from the Advanced and Skeleton tabs, since you can set their height and width yourself. As you can see, I have specific heights and widths so that they better mimic the element's respective width and height. After all this bony talk, let's open the query editor. At the top on the left, you can see the query ID, which is used to link the query block to the filters present on the page. As a side note, should you need it, you have the option to manually change your query ID by simply typing in a number of your choice. Besides the query ID, on the right, we can see that it is set to a product's query type, but as mentioned previously, to use the filter block, you can use any query type of your choosing. We can see that I have set up a type parameter for the type of product, a product parameter for a category taxonomy, a pagination parameter so that there are 9 items per page, a search parameter for our search filter, 4 taxonomy queries for our brand, size, color, and material taxonomies, and lastly a meta query for the price. Every filter on this page has a set parameter so that the user is allowed to perform specific filters. As you can probably start to understand, all these parameters need to be set in the query block, since the modifications that the filter blocks allows the users to perform can only target parameters that have already been defined from the query block. This is why, to understand how filtering works, it is essential you comprehend that a filter block can only ever filter what has been set from the query block. They work in parallel. On closer look, we can also observe a discernible pattern when it comes to how these parameters have been set up. The type is always dynamic, since it relies on data that can change depending on the different parameters available or set at the time, making it update automatically. The source is Wordpress. The data provided by Wordpress is URL parameter, since the terms parameter will be filled in dynamically by the user selection on the filter block. When we were playing around with the filters on the front end, we saw the URL parameter change according to the filters being added or removed. Lastly, the key is the URL parameter target. For example, in the product parameter, we have our category parameter set up so that the user can filter our product categories. So the key in this case is category. However, the key can be custom. So in the example of my material query taxonomy, the key is material. In most uses, the parameter will be set up as we have just described, which makes it easier to remember and set up. However, as this taxonomy demonstrates, it isn't always the case. As you can see, the terms parameter is identical to the previously mentioned way of setting up parameters, except for the key, which is of course material. The only difference with taxonomies is you have to precise the taxonomy you want to target. So in this case, I have defined product material as the taxonomy. However, if I take a look at the color query taxonomy, the taxonomy is set to product color. You get the picture. Lastly, always set the field parameter to slug, because the value provided by the filter block is a slug value used for the URL parameter. And that's it. Now that we understand how the query block is set up, we can move on to taking a look at the long-awaited filter block. Just like the query block, the filter block has its own filter editor, which permits you to set up the filter block's properties and hook it up to the parameter set in the query block. We will first be taking a look at an empty filter block in order to explain every property available, and then we will take a look at the filters I have already set up. So, in this newly added filter blocks editor, the first thing to do is to make sure the filter is hooked up to the right query with the help of the query ID, which allows the filter block to know what elements from which query block are to be filtered. So if, like me, you have already forgotten your query's ID, don't worry. You can find it by opening the query editor on the left right-hand corner. In this case, my query ID is 10. So, heading back to the filter editor, I can set it to 10. Next, we have the target field. The target is identical to the key that is set in the query block. For example, for my color taxonomy, the key is color. So if I was using this filter block to filter color, the target would be color. Now we have the filter type property, which is used to determine the type of filter you want to apply. Different markups are applied depending on the type chosen. Essentially, these different filter types determine the way a user interacts with a specific filter. In this properties drop-down menu, we have a large choice of types. First, we have the select filter type. The select filter type applies a component allowing users to choose one option from a temporary modal menu. Essentially, it is a scalable list of items placed in a drop-down. Next, we have the custom filter types. The custom filter type accommodates specific functions, such as the input block, which allows you to have a radio and checkbox filter type for your user to interact with. The button single filter type allows users to choose one option, removing all the other ones, as opposed to the multiple button that allows users to choose several options at a time. Then we have specific filters that have a specific function and aren't general. We have the user and clear selection filter types, which have self-explanatory names. Finally, we have the range selection filter type, which allows users to utilize the range slider block. A range slider is an on-screen control to help you filter and step through numeric data ranges. For the sake of this example, let's leave the type to select. Now, leaving the filter type realm is the data source, which can be static, dynamic, or user input. As a reminder, a static source relies on manual changes, whereas a dynamic source relies on data that can change depending on the different parameters available or set at a time, making it update automatically. A static source is to be used when you want to provide your own options and values, since you manually type them in. A dynamic source is to be used when you don't want to input the data manually and want to rely on taxonomies. A user input is to be used whenever you need the value to be equal to the value input. Essentially, it isn't a predefined value and is dependent on what the user inputs. This is most commonly used for search filters. Let's first explore a static source. As you can see, I can add options by selecting the plus button. I can add as many as I want. So let's say I want to create an option for when a product is on sale and for when it isn't. I can simply set the label to on sale, which has a true value, and not on sale with a false value. Moving along, let's now try out a dynamic source. The data type in this example is taxonomy. Here, you can set the taxonomy to whatever taxonomy you want this filter to target. For example, we can select the product color taxonomy since we had set color as the key. The below properties allow you to have a more specific taxonomy listing. Below these properties, there are two toggles, Childless and Hide Empty. The Childless property, once toggled, will only show terms that don't have children. The Hide Empty property will hide terms that don't contain any posts or products. Lastly, Beneath the data type setting are two toggles and fields that we have yet to discover. The Count Items toggle can be used to let Cwicly know how many items that specific term contains. As its name indicates, it counts the items. So if you want to display how many items a term contains, or if you want to let the user know whenever there are no items left in a term, which both need the terms to be counted, be sure to enable this property. The Show and Selection toggle will show or hide the filter from the selection filter. The Selection Prefix field allows you to add text before a selected term for this specific filter. The Selection Suffix field allows you to add text after a selected term for this specific filter. Let's now check out the filter blocks I have already set up. As you can see by the settings of these different filter blocks, their settings are fairly similar and repetitive, making it easy to set up. The great thing about the filter block is its flexibility, since at any given time you can change the filter type to anything else without it breaking anything on the page. For example, if I no longer wanted this material filter to have a select filter type, but for it to be a simple single button type, I can, with a little switcheroo. In an effort to keep this video short and sweet, we won't be going into the details of adding blocks to the filter block once these settings have been set in the filter editor. Please check the next video in this series. And that's how the Cwicly Filter Block works.